In the 9th chapter of the Satyarth Prakash, the text turns its focus to a single overriding question. What exactly are the mechanics of human bondage, and how does a conscious entity extract itself from it? The author, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, approaches this not as a mystic, but as a logician. He methodically dismantles centuries of orthodox mysticism to build a strictly mechanical framework for reality. The text outright rejects the prevailing theory of non-dualism, the idea that all of reality is a single, undivided consciousness. Instead, it argues for absolute logical realism. Reality is composed of three eternal, distinct entities: the soul, matter, and God. They interact, but they never merge. By keeping these three entities strictly separate, the text constructs a system where human action actually matters, and the absolute justice of God remains intact. To understand bondage, we have to define ignorance. This matrix maps out Avidya, classifying it into 4 specific errors in human perception, mistaking the impermanent for the permanent, the impure for the pure, pain for pleasure, and the non-self for the self. The text provides exact parameters for these errors. Believing a decaying physical body is pure, or thinking that endless sensory indulgence will yield actual happiness, are mechanical failures in perceiving reality. Vidya, or true knowledge, is the precise reversal of these 4 quadrants. It is the cognitive ability to apprehend reality exactly as it is, without projection or distortion. Neo-Vedantin philosophers argue against this separation. They posit that the human soul and God are the exact same entity, and that bondage is simply an illusion caused by the soul being confused by physical containers, like the sky reflecting in a broken jar. This geometric proof deconstructs that analogy. A reflection requires physical boundaries, a distinct shape, and a separate light source. God is defined as boundless, formless, and all-pervading. A formless, omnipresent entity cannot physically cast a reflection. The math of the metaphor fails. The text also targets the concept of adhyaropa, or superimposition, the idea that God imagines the physical universe. A perfect, all-knowing entity lacks the capacity for localized ignorance or false imagination. To suggest otherwise introduces a flaw into absolute perfection. If God and the individual soul are identical, then God is the direct author of his own ignorance and suffering. For God to remain perfect and just, the creator and the soul must be distinct. Liberation, or moksha, is defined strictly as the complete cessation of suffering. The soul exists in a state of realized bliss, moving freely within God's omnipresence. Upon entering this state, the soul discards the physical body entirely. There are no sensory organs, no nervous system, and no physical brain. Instead, the soul operates using 24 inherent powers. Attributes like strength, action, comprehension, and memory allow the soul to experience reality using its own pure, unmediated energy. But the text introduces a highly controversial constraint. Liberation is not eternal. The soul eventually returns to the physical universe. This timeline illustrates the exact calculation. A soul remains in moksha for 1 parantakala. That time frame equals exactly 36,000 cycles of cosmic creation and dissolution. This finite time frame is dictated by the law of proportionate causality. A finite entity performing finite actions cannot logically earn an infinite reward. An eternal heaven for temporary deeds breaks the basic equation of justice. There is also a cosmological necessity. If souls entered an eternal moksha and never returned, the physical universe would eventually suffer total depletion, grinding the cycle of existence to a halt. Returning from liberation is not a punishment. It is the necessary, logical operation of a mathematically perfect and sustainable universe. This diagram models the Panchakosha, the 5 anatomical sheaths that surround and insulate the pure soul. To achieve moksha, a human must master this exact framework. The outermost layer is the annamaya, the gross physical body of bone and tissue. Beneath that is the pranamaya, the vital respiratory and energetic systems. Then the manomaya, the sensory and processing mind, the vijnanamaya, the intellect and analytical faculty, And finally, the Anandamaya, the causal sheath of deep bliss and latent memory. These sheaths operate across 3 states of existence, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and map onto 4 distinct bodies: the gross, the subtle, the causal, and the state of pure absorption during deep meditation. The soul itself is completely distinct from all of these sheaths and states. It acts purely as the independent director, utilizing this biological machine without becoming it. Peeling back these layers requires specific psychological tools. The practitioner must cultivate intense discrimination between truth and falsehood, paired with absolute detachment from sensory outcomes. Liberation is an anatomical extraction. It demands precise cognitive assimilation through continuous listening, rigorous contemplation, and deep, sustained meditation. Competing theologies offer a very different model of salvation. They promise distinct, bordered heavens, whether it's the Jain Moksha Shila, the Christian or Islamic heavens, the Shaiva Kailash, or the Vaishnava Vaikuntha. The text critiques these models as merely physical locations containing sensory pleasures and bodily forms. A geographical heaven with boundaries and sensory indulgences is structurally no different than earthly bondage. True moksha has no borders. When confronted with the paradox of past lives, the system remains strictly logical. The soul is finite in its knowledge. Forgetting past lives is a mechanism of divine mercy, preventing the psychological paralysis that would result from remembering an infinite chain of trauma and death. Congenital inequality, the fact that humans are born into vastly different circumstances, is the ultimate proof of divine justice. Unequal starting lines are the direct mathematical result of prior karma. If everyone's starting identically, regardless of past actions, God would be unjust. The mechanics of death discard mythological grim reapers. The text defines Yama, the Lord of Death, strictly as Vayu, the air and space where the soul is temporarily suspended before natural law guides it into a new biological vessel. The afterlife is not a gated community in the sky. It is the strict, locationless execution of natural law and karmic weight. This chart categorizes the deterministic matrix of reincarnation, driven by the 3 gunas, or qualities of nature: Sattva for purity and knowledge, Rajas for passion and action, and Tamas for inertia and ignorance. The outputs are exact. Tamasic destinies map the lowest states of ignorance, charting a strict hierarchy from plants and insects, up through violent predators, and terminating at human hypocrites and those who thrive on chaos. Rajasic destinies map the results of aggressive action. This column scales from frontline fighters and gamblers at the bottom, up through administrators, and peaks at wealthy elites, diplomats, and kings. Sattvic destinies represent purity. This top tier begins with ascetics and disciplined students, moving upward to master astronomers, creators of universal structures, and the highest possible human intellects. Every living being is caught somewhere in this chart. Mastering yoga, stopping the involuntary fluctuations of the mind, is the only mechanism to transcend all 3 columns and escape the matrix entirely. Biology and social hierarchy are not arbitrary assignments. They are the exact mathematical readouts of a soul's internal composition of the gunas. The framework laid out in Chapter 9 is a closed-loop system, entirely devoid of paradox, illusion, or arbitrary divine whims. Maintaining the absolute, eternal distinction between the individual soul and God is the only logical way to preserve both human agency and divine justice. While ensuring that liberation itself is mathematically finite, the text protects the physical universe from depletion, preserving the eternal balance of the cosmos. In this ontology, nothing is a mystery. Every physical incarnation, every latent memory, and every state of absolute bliss is the precise mechanical output of knowledge, action, and nature.